fourth episode of the 2 News Oklahoma Cold Case podcast. Senior reporter Sharon Phillips is joining me, Katie, the digital director at 2 again. And we're just continuing our project. We're really trying to keep shining lights on these cold cases that we've been covering in all platforms, like from on air to podcasts. If you're listening now, we'll use them on our social. We'll do them on all of our streaming platforms, and they air weekly. Sharon's been putting together. You have about 9 done so far. So we've aired the first 3 on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. on 2 News Oklahoma, and then they live on our website and all of our platforms. And then they also re-air on Sunday nights at 10 o'clock. So, I mean, cold cases are just really a passion for you, Sharon.
They are.
Talk to us about what you've learned on this process. You've talked to so many investigators and so many families since you've started these stories.
Yeah, we often as reporters will meet people on the worst day of their life, and they're sharing their grief, they're sharing their stories with us, and you always as a reporter want to do something more. And so I was so glad when you came up with this idea, because I think it is something where we can use the power of our medium to take it a little bit further. And, just talking with investigators and, of course, the victims' families, it's just heartbreaking because, for the investigators, they're kind of in a corner. They don't really have anywhere else to go, and the case is cold.
I mean, scenes are gone. People move. Like, it's hard. It has to be so frustrating, and you feel like your hands are tied as investigators, especially if you get a case years later, because it's not like you can go back to the scene and find new evidence.
Exactly. And a lot of times these cases are passed on as investigators retire or through attrition or whatnot. And so it can be very frustrating for them because they want that case solved. They want to bring closure to the family. And for the family side of it, all they have is hope. And so for us, I think that is our responsibility as journalists to give them hope and to keep pressing forward and to keep doing everything that we can to help, give the investigators a break in these cases.
Well, and that was one thing. I listened to too many podcast accounts. So I know like the true crime genre and podcast is really booming. And unlike TV where we do have a time limit, you could do, 15, 20 hour stories on these people talking to their families. But we just don't have the same time. And here on the podcast, we have more freedom to go a little bit longer, to share more of their stories. So this week we are going to talk about a case with Lisa Ledbetter, who we actually featured a few years ago when it was still a cold case. And then when Sharon went to investigators, they brought her up again. So we went back and talked to her again, or talked to her family, talked to investigators about her case. So Sharon, tell us who Lisa was.
So Lisa was, she was young. She was only 24 years old at the time of her death.
Oh my gosh.
And according to investigators and also her family, she was kind of a little bit on the wild side, running with the wrong crowd. And
which lots of teens go through.
Right. I mean, we've all been there.
We've all been there. And that's not something anyone should lose their life over.
Right. And so, she was kind of out. It was September 24th, 1984. That was the last time that she was seen alive. And her friends were at a bar on South Peoria, kind of near 58th and Peoria, roughly. And they were all having a great time. They were laughing and drinking and talking. And there was a rumor that Lisa had overheard some of her friends talking about some criminal activities that they had been involved in. And I think she was upset about that and tired of that and kind of wanted to get away from that and separate herself. And so there were some reports that she had made, an announcement like, I'm going to go talk to the police if you all keep doing this or if you don't stop kind of thing. And so that right there is a possible motive for her death. And it was a really sad evening. So according to investigators, they were at that bar in Peoria. They ended up leaving, and then her body was found the next morning, Tuesday, September 25th, up on Lookout Mountain in West Tulsa. And she had been savagely beaten, cut. She was stabbed. She was also sexually assaulted. The evidence also indicates that more than one person probably did this to her. And so investigators believe 2, maybe 3 were involved
Wow.
in her death. And it was just a very brutal death.
And her family is still obviously dealing with the repercussions of this. Her niece talked to you and talked a little bit about what she remembers about her aunt, what she's heard. So let me play that for us.
It must have been that bond that we had when I was 16 months old that I felt so close to her, and I've never lost that. I still feel close to her, even though I can't remember her.
We run into that in so many of the cases that you've done. There's been a family member who was too young to remember the victim, but still feels that tie that I think all family members do. There was the case, I'm going to not remember the name because we've recorded too many of these, but she had the daughter who was so young and she has no memories of her mother, but
Rebecca
reminds
Barrett.
people of her mother. So it's just so sad. So she was found dead on Lookout Mountain, which is in West Tulsa. So she got somehow from 58th and Peoria over to Lookout Mountain and was savagely beaten. And we talked about her lifestyle, and investigators did too. I'm going to share one of these sound bites. We pulled a few from the interview. This is what we love about the podcast. These are sound bites that weren't necessarily in the story that's going to air, so we can share a little bit more background and more insight. So here is more on the investigation into Lisa Ledbetter's murder.
There's been a few rumors that have gone on that, my mom, just like I said, she wasn't living the best lifestyle and she had been running drugs for some people. And that she, something happened and she owed those people.
So she's speaking about her mother, which was Lisa's sister. So Lisa was her aunt.
Oh,
and so they, this was her niece that we interviewed. And so her mother and Lisa were kind of running in the same crowd. And
so they had
theory,
similar, that it could have been connected.
There's a theory that's what the family thinks. So
okay, so the two main theories are one that she was talking to her friends who were in criminal activity and saying, "Hey, I'm going to turn you guys in, stop it," which is another common thread we've heard in these cases. Sometimes if you are voicing these concerns or voicing things too broadly, then the wrong person hears it, and then you become a target.
Right.
Or vice versa with the case with the family member who may have owed someone in the drug world, that kind of thing. So it's just really important to the family and to the investigators to solve this case.
And like you had mentioned earlier, this is something that we as reporters have been investigating and highlighting for years. And so this one really sticks with us because, Lisa was so young and she had her whole life ahead of her, and her family is just heartbroken over this, as all of them are.
Well, and just to think about going from being out with your friends, like at a bar, at a restaurant, wherever you are, like that's something everyone does every day. And then just to being found murdered in such a for those of you who aren't familiar with Lookout Mountain, it's kind of out in West Tulsa. It's kind of secluded, kind of like it's not quite in Sand Springs or Tulsa. I think it's technically in Tulsa, but it's kind of like in that in-between area. And you kind of really do have to drive up to get to it. I mean, it's the Oklahoma version of a mountain.
Right.
But I mean, it's somebody brought her there thinking no one would find her.
Exactly. It's a really wooded area. There's a road leading up to the top, but then there's kind of wooded areas on either side. And so I think you're right. I think they thought, well, we'll just toss her body here on the side and, no one will find her and it'll be fine. And that wasn't the case. And, for investigators too, this is so frustrating for them because, they're looking at multiple people who did this. And so they just don't have a lot of leads to go on. It was late at night and there weren't any cameras around.
Right. It was 1984.
Yeah.
There's not the same kind of things you can look for now. In this case from 1984, this case is almost 40 years old. That's the evidence is not robust.
Right.
And it's not going to become robust. It's really going to rely on anyone who may have heard anything. If you knew Lisa or maybe knew who she was hanging out with at the time, that might have more information. If you just heard anyone talking, her family is really just desperate to get some closure. Here is her niece.
I want this solved. This, means her life mattered.
It did matter.
It
Her
did.
life mattered. And like you said, I mean, she was young. We all did crazy things when we were younger and, sampled whatever.
Right.
And she did not deserve to die.
You have the right to sow your wild oats and not have something like this happen to you.
Exactly.
And that's what makes it so tragic. So we're going to air Lisa's story on 2 News Oklahoma coming up on Thursdays at 10. And then it's going to be on all of our socials. We're going to have the link to this podcast on our Facebook pages and that's 2 News Oklahoma's Facebook page, Sharon Phillips' Facebook page. You can share it with your friends. If you are from here and you may have known people in the area, or if you're not from here and you just stumbled on to this podcast, you can share it. That's the power of social media now. And that's how so many crimes are really actually getting solved. Like you hear so much in the true crime podcast world and the true crime documentary world about like someone just heard something and someone and it triggers like an avalanche in the investigation. There can be genealogical DNA that can help find people. Like there's so many advances now that it's really important to keep getting these cases out there.
It really is. And, just if you're looking for a way, a lot of people like to volunteer or like to serve on committees or nonprofits or whatnot. This is a way for you to really be a game changer in someone's life and her family's life and the investigator's life. All these people working so hard.
Who are so tied to these cases.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us for Lisa's case. And we hope that this helps find answers and we hope you share it. And we'll see you next week.